14. Ryan Big Rig Crowley. In a horrifying video that appeared on social media in 2021, famed bodybuilder Ryan Big Rig Crowley tore a pectoral muscle while attempting to bench press 485 pounds. The nausea-inducing clip first appeared on the Instagram account of his friend and fellow bodybuilder Larry Wheels. In a follow-up post from his own account, Crowley explained that he'd torn his entire pectoral tendon off the bone, requiring him to undergo reconstructive surgery. At that point, all he could do was hope that the potentially career-ruining injury fully healed. While Crowley began his lengthy road to recovery, Wheels started a crowdfunding campaign to help him cover his living and medical costs while he recuperated. The fundraiser garnered over $38,000 in donations from generous followers. Just a month after the first incident, Crowley suffered yet another pectoral tear to the same muscle, but this time it happened while he was getting dressed. Crowley was extremely disappointed by the painful setback, but remained determined to recover and get back to bodybuilding. He was also relieved to learn that he didn't need a second surgery. 13. Sophie Bundler. 21-year-old Sophie Bundler had just finished college and was looking forward to going out and celebrating in July of 2017. But she wanted to squeeze in a workout first, so she went to her gym in Essex, England, a familiar place that she'd been going to almost daily for several years. She would have never imagined that she would leave with a life-changing injury. While using the squat machine, Sophie lost her footing and toppled onto the floor, causing a 155-pound weight to fall on top of her in the process. It landed on her back, and at first she couldn't feel her injuries. But the pain began to set in about 20 minutes later, when she realized that she still couldn't feel or wiggle her toes. During her visit to the emergency room, Sophie learned that she was paralyzed. The weights had fractured her back and damaged her spinal cord. And whether or not she would ever walk again remained to be seen. Sophie underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage to her spinal cord and began a lengthy road to recovery, uncertain of what her physical limits would be. It took weeks before she could even sit up, and she required intensive physiotherapy in order to attend her college graduation in a wheelchair. The mental trauma she suffered from the accident initially left her fearful of returning to the gym, but she eventually started working out again. Today, Sophie remains in a wheelchair, and she proudly owns it as part of her identity. She's become popular on social media with hundreds of thousands of followers, and in 2021, she was named Cosmopolitan Magazine's Influencer of the Year. 12. The murder of Lisa Patterson. Scott and Lisa Patterson met during a night out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they got married less than a year later in 1996. To many, the couple's relationship seemed like a fairy tale, an image that Scott exaggerated by wearing a beast mask during his wedding dance with his beauty, Lisa. By all outward appearances, the marriage was ideal. Both Scott and Lisa had successful careers, enabling them to live a comfortable lifestyle which included a nice home and frequent vacations. And for a while, the relationship really was good, but it didn't stay that way. In 2009, after 13 years of marriage, Scott filed for divorce. He was cheating with a woman named Stacey Henderson, and Lisa had discovered the affair. At some point, however, the couple decided to halt the divorce proceedings and give their relationship one last try. It didn't last long, however, thanks to a conveniently timed tragedy that left Lisa dead and Scott under suspicion of murder. On the afternoon of July 9th, Scott dialed 911 and claimed that he arrived home to find Lisa crushed to death by a barbell in their home gym. She had apparently dropped the weight while using a machine with safety features that should have prevented a deadly accident. The barbell was found on top of her throat, and by the time Scott called for help, he was on his way to the hospital with Lisa in his truck. An ambulance intercepted him along the way and tried to save Lisa's life, but sadly it was too late. During a search of the home, detectives discovered that there were no DVDs recording footage from the home surveillance system. Eventually, though, they obtained a backup copy from the security company and quickly discovered that Scott had been lying to them. The footage showed Scott arriving home hours earlier than he claimed. Police were also suspicious because they remembered receiving a report in 2001 claiming that Scott had asked someone to kill Lisa for him. The tip had led nowhere, but 8 years later it suddenly seemed like a big deal. Not to mention, Scott's affair seemed like more than enough cause for a motive. A closer examination of the weight machine revealed that its safety features should have stopped Lisa from being able to drop the dumbbell on herself, and that even if she had dropped it, she would have been able to wiggle out from underneath. Lisa also wasn't known to use the machine in the first place, making it highly questionable that she just happened to have a deadly accident the one time she decided to use it. The nature of her death was further called into question when an autopsy showed that she had been slowly strangled rather than suddenly injured. Another bombshell came when detectives discovered that Lisa had changed the beneficiary of her life insurance policy about a month before her death, indicating that at the very least she was preparing to leave Scott. 2 months after Lisa's death, Scott Patterson was indicted for murder. He maintained his innocence throughout the case, denying prosecutors' allegations that he lured Lisa into their home gym with plans to kill her. A jury found him guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 60 years in prison. His multiple subsequent attempts to appeal his case have failed, but records show that he could see freedom again as early as 2039 at the age of 70. 11. Justin Vicki. Indonesian fitness instructor Justin Vicki met his untimely death in July of 2023 when he crushed his neck in a tragic weightlifting accident at a gym in Sanur. The 33-year-old was doing a squat exercise while holding a 450-pound barbell behind his head when the massive weight rolled forward and caused the injury that claimed his life. According to news reports, he was trying to straighten out his legs and was struggling to stand upright. Doctors performed emergency surgery in an attempt to save Vicki's life, but his injuries weren't survivable. Just hours before his death, he'd posted a social media video demonstrating the complicated exercise, which he described as an extremely dangerous maneuver that's rarely done properly. As a bodybuilding expert, Vicki was known for following safe practices, and he was exercising under the watchful eye of a spotter when the accident occurred. The Daily Mail reported that his death was caused by a broken neck and critical compression of vital nerves connecting to his heart and lungs. 10. Diego Galindo. On what began as an ordinary Wednesday evening in September 2014, 44-year-old Diego Galindo began his regular workout at a Bali Total Fitness gym in South San Francisco. Out of nowhere, a fellow member, later identified as 46-year-old Kenneth Asako, approached him from behind and repeatedly struck him in the head with a steel weightlifting bar. Asako then dropped the bar onto the floor and exited the gym. Galindo died from his injuries the following day, and Asako surrendered to police at his home that evening after witnesses identified him as the attacker. It was initially unclear whether the two men knew each other or what Asako's motive was for attacking Galindo. The accused killer's daughter, Kealani Asako, told ABC7 that from her understanding, her father was upset with Galindo for trying to talk to his girlfriend. Kealani mentioned that she'd seen her father being overtaken with anger in the past, and that she could imagine how angry he was during the gym incident. She further revealed that her suspicion that her dad suffered from undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and she apologized to Galindo's family for her father's actions. Asako initially pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder, and the case was ordered to go to trial. Prosecutors claimed that the defendant was angry at Galindo for inviting his girlfriend on a motorcycle ride, while the defense argued that a different man had flirted with Asako's girlfriend and that he was triggered by a separate incident. In early 2016, Asako changed his plea to no contest. Through his lawyer, he claimed that he was pumped up on steroids and methamphetamine on the day of the attack, and that a brief encounter with Galindo in the locker room was enough to send him into an uncontrolled bout of roid rage. Asako said that he changed his plea to avoid putting the family through a trial and express remorse for his actions, saying that he felt terrible about what happened, especially now that he was off drugs. As a consequence, he was sentenced to 17 years to life in prison. 9. Shane William Ryan. During the early morning hours, one day in October of 2020, a 33-year-old Australian fitness junkie named Shane William Ryan dropped a 44-pound weight on his friend's head at a gym in Rosebery. The friend suffered numerous injuries, including cuts, swelling, headaches, chest pain, and a facial fracture. He also experienced anxiety and required ongoing medical care for his ailments. A review of the gym's CCTV footage led investigators to believe that Ryan had pretended to trip while his friend was lying on his back using some free weights. The victim had weight in his hands at the time, making him almost completely defenseless as the 20-pound dumbbell fell on his face. Ryan insisted that it was an accident, but in the video he could be seen leaning over the victim before dropping the weight. He appeared to be faking an ankle injury and didn't exactly rush to call for emergency help as his friend lay on the floor with a bleeding head wound. In the months leading up to the incident, Ryan and his friend appeared to be on good terms. There was no evidence to suggest a recent falling out or any other underlying motive for the cruel act. But after initially maintaining his innocence, Ryan pleaded guilty to unlawfully causing harm. He was sentenced to 19 months in prison with the requirement to serve at least 10 months behind bars, and has never explained why he hurt his friend. Speaking with the Daily Mail, a close friend speculated that Ryan suffered from mental health issues, but also made it clear that nobody in the man's life excused his behavior. 8. Snezana Stojanovska. Late one morning in 2010, an Australian resident named Dragi Stojanovski found his pregnant wife dead on a makeshift weight bench at the couple's home in Melbourne. Emergency responders arrived to find 26-year-old mother-to-be Snezana Stojanovska's body on an ironing board that was propped up with telephone books. There was also a 65-pound barbell resting nearby. Dragi told investigators that he'd found the barbell lying on Snezana's chest. Just a few nights earlier, Snezana had found out she was expecting. She was elated by the news, but the timing of events and the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death caused investigators to wonder if she had been met with foul play. 8 years later, in 2018, an inquest was launched to put lingering suspicions about the cause of Snezana's death to rest. State coroner Sarah Hinchy ruled that Snezana had been strangled in a homicide, and that her death was staged to look like a tragic weightlifting accident. There were 3 other people at home when Snezana died: her husband Dragi, his brother Vasko Stojanovski, and Dragi's mother Pisana Stojanovska. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, leading Hinchy to suspect that one of the household members killed Snezana. However, there wasn't enough evidence to identify the likely murderer, and all 3 of the individuals who were home at the time of the incident refused to testify during the inquest. In her findings, Hinchy revealed that an autopsy found bruising on Snezana's neck that was inconsistent with a weightlifting accident. The report noted that the injuries were more consistent with strangling. Furthermore, the autopsy ruled that Snezana likely died as much as 11 hours before emergency help was called. Records showed that someone called a doctor's office 35 minutes before summoning paramedics to the scene. In Snezana's diary, investigators found entries about weight training that appeared to be inconsistent with her other passages, leading them to believe that the entries were put there to make a weightlifting-related death seem plausible. 7. Jared Shamburger. A Texas teenager named Jared Shamburger joined a Houston area gym in 2018 and began working out hardcore in an attempt to catch up with his father and brother, who were avid bodybuilders. Just weeks later, he suddenly became extremely sore after lifting weights for an hour and a half one day. His entire body hurt and became swollen, and he could tell it wasn't a case of typical workout-related aches and pains. Jared had no idea what was wrong, but his mother Judy suspected a condition called rhabdomyolysis. According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the illness occurs when damaged muscle tissue releases proteins and electrolytes into the blood. In addition to the potential to cause heart and kidney damage, the condition can be fatal if left untreated. Thankfully, in Jared's case, it was caught in time and was treated effectively, thanks to his observant mother. But it was still a scary situation that left him hospitalized for 5 days with life-threatening symptoms before his health started to improve. 6. Jessica Feeney. In 2022, an Irish Garda cop named Jessica Feeney filed 2 personal injury lawsuits claiming that she suffered debilitating ailments that made everyday tasks painful and difficult. One of the incidents supposedly happened on the job in 2018 when she was struck by the door of a horse trailer. The other case was blamed on an alleged assault during a Westlife concert in 2019. Feeney provided a particularly graphic description of the injuries she claimed to have suffered after the second incident, including a wound requiring 8 stitches to her ear and permanent bald spots left behind by clumps of hair that were ripped from her head. The ailing cop claimed that every aspect of her existence had become debilitating ever since she received the injuries, which she said prevented her from training at the gym on an intensive level as she had in the past. In addition to her physical complaints, Feeney said that she was traumatized by the assault, which left her with worsening depression and anxiety that caused her to avoid crowds. She even claimed that she was afraid of going outside alone, period. A lawyer for the opposition called BS on Feeney's injuries during a court hearing in 2023 and backed up his claims with photos and videos of her socializing, competing in bodybuilding competitions, and lifting weights of up to 177 pounds. The content was all posted after Feeney filed the injury claims, and she'd even won some of the bodybuilding competitions, strongly indicating that she wasn't incapable of working out. During the multi-day hearing, the judge overseeing the case expressed concerns over the issues that were being brought up during cross-examination. He reminded Feeney that any negative findings could impact her career in law enforcement, and she dropped both cases very quickly thereafter. When the Sunday World contacted Feeney's lawyer for a comment, he said that the news outlet's article didn't reflect the true nature of the situation and that it was misleading. He warned that very serious consequences would follow if the article were published, but the newspaper went ahead and published it anyway. Sean Barron, the farmer Feeney accused of hitting her with an open horse trailer door, told the Sunday World that he'd gone out of his way to make sure Feeney was okay after the incident, even calling the police station to double-check. He said that everything had seemed fine until he received a letter from the woman's lawyer informing him that he was being sued. Barron said that he was relieved to learn that the case was dropped, but he commented on how he'd already suffered financially from insurance costs due to the bogus claim. 5. The murder of Ed Thomas. 58-year-old high school football coach Ed Thomas was considered a legend in the rural town of Parkersburg, Iowa, where he coached 4 players who went on to play for the NFL. He was loved by the entire local population of 2,000 residents, or so it seemed, and people were stunned beyond words when he was murdered at his workplace one morning in 2009. The unspeakable tragedy occurred while Thomas was supervising an early morning weightlifting session in a makeshift workout area next to the high school where he coached his team. In a horrific scene that remains burned into the 22 witnesses' memories, a 24-year-old former student named Mark Becker entered the building and fatally shot Thomas. In a rare display of compassion between devastated families, Mark's parents, Dave and Joan Becker, and Ed Thomas's widow and children grieved together. Local residents respected the Thomas family's wish for the Beckers not to be demonized over the actions of their son, who'd been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia just 3 days before the crime. Mark's parents had reportedly spent years trying to get their son the mental help that he desperately needed. During his especially troubled teen years, Mark had received guidance from Thomas, who coached his football team. As the teen entered adulthood, he developed a serious substance abuse problem and became plagued by dark and unpredictable moods, even during periods of sobriety. He also began hearing voices, but still he resisted help. During one particularly terrifying episode, Mark took a baseball bat to his basement walls, thinking he was being attacked by a force that nobody else in his family could see. And when his parents tried to calm him down, he lashed out at them, thinking they were part of a conspiracy to poison young minds in Parkersburg. Around the same time, Mark began to believe that Thomas was communicating with him mentally. He was committed to emergency psychiatric evaluations multiple times over the following months, but he was never kept in the hospital for very long. He was released from one of these visits just 2 days before he shot Thomas, and despite their best efforts to keep Mark in custody, the system failed them. According to journalist Anna Hinger-Klein, Mark pried open his parents' locked gun cabinet with a deer antler while they were at work to get his hands on the weapon. Mark told police that he believed Thomas was conspiring with his parents to toxify the minds of local young people. He believed that what he'd done was necessary to mentally free the suspected captives. It would later be revealed that he had no drugs in his system at the time of the shooting, indicating that he'd acted while in the throes of a schizophrenic episode. The troubled killer's insanity plea failed to hold up in court, and he was convicted of first-degree murder. He was given a life sentence without parole, which he's reportedly serving at a medical prison. Since then, the Beckers have dedicated themselves to an ongoing fight for mental health care reform in hopes of preventing a similar tragedy from ever happening again. 4. Elena Hadanova. 46-year-old Czech bodybuilder Elena Hadanova was just hours away from competing in the 2021 Europa Pro competition in Alicante, Spain, when she suddenly stopped being able to move while waiting for her spray tan to dry. It was a hot August morning, and after going hard in all aspects of competition her entire career, she was suddenly resigned to the realization that she wouldn't be able to compete that day. Hadanova told a fellow athlete standing nearby that she felt extremely ill. Her friend helped ease her onto the floor, where she lay down on her back. As a crowd of concerned bystanders gathered, she convulsed and became unresponsive. Then, after waiting nearly an hour for an ambulance, the ailing athlete was rushed to a nearby hospital, where doctors failed to save her life despite their best efforts. Elena's death immediately fueled speculation that drugs, dehydration, and other extremes the bodybuilders resort to in preparation for competition were to blame. According to the Washington Post, experts claim that it's extremely difficult for aspiring competitive bodybuilders to break into the very lowest of the professional ranks without using steroids. To win a high-level competition in the absence of anabolic steroids is essentially unheard of. Bodybuilders also take other drugs to make their muscles look as defined as possible, including diuretics, which help to shed every last bit of water weight. This is what killed Elena Hadanova, according to the Post, which noted that she was able to answer questions about her diuretic use before she lost consciousness and never woke up. Elena was reportedly known for embracing the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of bodybuilding, including the use of drugs and diuretics. Sadly though, like many others who are willing to go to extremes to win, this seemingly unavoidable part of competing in the professional realm ended up costing the elite athlete her life. 3. Charles-Antoine Lon. Deadlifting involves lifting a heavy barbell to hip level. It's an unbelievably loud activity because it's almost impossible for someone to quietly set the apparatus down on the floor without dropping it. Some gyms are equipped with specialized platforms to reduce the noise, but many aren't. 19-year-old Charles-Antoine Lon was at a Montreal area gym that lacked the specialized equipment when the sound of his deadlifting bothered another gym-goer in 2018. At the time, Lalonde was filming his reps so he could send the video to his online powerlifting coach later on for critiquing and guidance. He ended up being glad that the camera was rolling when the annoyed gym member came by and kicked the 350-pound barbell out of his hands. The stranger then proceeded to shove Lalonde against a wall and shouted at him to leave the gym. Lalonde was extremely upset about what had happened when he sent the footage to his coach, Pete Rubish, who has tens of thousands of YouTube followers. With Lalonde's permission, Rubish posted the clip, which quickly went viral. The gym's owner, Craig Johnson, told the Montreal Gazette that his staff had previously asked Lalonde to place mats where he was deadlifting to reduce the noise. Lalonde complied and was following the request when the incident happened. Johnson said that the man who assaulted Lalonde wasn't a regular, and that it took some effort to identify him while reviewing the gym's surveillance footage. He was banned from the facility, and an employee was suspended in connection with the incident. Meanwhile, Johnson said that he'd tried repeatedly to contact Lalonde with an offer of a lifetime membership, but he was unable to get in touch with the young man. 2. Chris Bailey. After a night out drinking with friends in 2012, 28-year-old bakery worker Chris Bailey decided to pump some iron on a weight bench that he bought 6 weeks earlier to save money on gym fees. He was last seen entering his garage in West Sussex, England at around 3 a.m. in the same clothes he'd worn out the previous evening. Hours later, at about 1 p.m., Bailey's landlord found him dead on the weight bench with a heavy barbell lying across his chest. The property owner, Oliver Steer, told the Daily Mail that he struggled to move the weight off Bailey because it was so heavy. He said that he tried to resuscitate the young man, but it was pretty clear that Bailey was already dead. Police reportedly determined that he most likely passed away at least 5 hours prior to being found. An inquest ruled Bailey's death as accidental, with compression to the neck being listed as the official cause. According to the findings, one of the young man's friends had called the police the night before to report that Bailey was badgering him about where he'd hidden a bottle of Jack Daniels. Toxicology results revealed that Bailey's blood alcohol content was 3.5 times the legal limit when he died. A burned-out marijuana joint was also found near Bailey's head when his body was discovered the next day, further indicating that he hadn't been sober when he decided to exercise alone during the early morning hours. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Kyle Thompson. 22-year-old Iowa State University senior Kyle Thompson was looking forward to a fulfilling future. He was just months away from graduating with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and hoped to become a police canine handler. Sadly though, the young man never got a chance to see where life would have taken him. In a horrific accident that nobody saw coming, he dropped a 315-pound barbell on himself in December 2016 while bench pressing at a gym in Ankeny. Thompson was working with a spotter when the tragedy occurred. Shortly after his death, his high school football coach Greg Schoon told the Des Moines Register that he'd become dedicated to working out in an effort to meet the fitness requirements for police work. Another friend said that Thompson had recently lost a lot of weight and had become passionate about weightlifting. While weightlifting accidents aren't necessarily uncommon, weightlifting-related deaths are rare, according to a 2010 study by researchers from the nationwide Children's Hospital Center for Injury Research and Policy. The findings revealed that nearly 1 million Americans received emergency room treatment for weightlifting injuries over 17 years from 1990 to 2007, with less than 2% leading to long-term hospitalization and 114 resulting in death. Thompson just happened to be among those unlucky few who've had their life cut short in this unusual way. A similar tragedy occurred in early 2023 when 61-year-old veteran weightlifter Carl Hughes dropped a metal bar on his own neck at his home in the seaside town of Ross-on-Sea, Wales. He became trapped beneath the 132-pound barbell while training alone in his bedroom. And sadly, he wasn't discovered until his neighbor noticed that he wasn't picking up his morning newspaper and went to go check on him. In Hughes' case, it's hard to say whether a spotter around could have been life-saving, but it's always a good idea to have one when it comes to working out with heavy weights.
Number 9. Ian Bonnock. After enduring a rocky 8-year marriage, 39-year-old Katie Bonnock separated from her bodybuilder husband, 43-year-old Ian Bonnock. She obtained a restraining order against him in 2022. After dropping off their 2 kids with a sitter one day, she went to Ian's home in Fort Denard, Florida, to collect some of her belongings and never returned. The next day, police found a jawbone and burn pile on Ian's property along with a 50-gallon barrel filled with decomposing body parts. They charged him with first-degree murder, as well as possession of a controlled substance for having steroids without a prescription. Ian was also federally charged for having 13 unregistered silencers that were found in his home. He admitted that he was angry at Katie for filing a domestic violence injunction against him, according to a federal complaint. Katie's cousin Annie Moore told the Daily Beast that Katie said Ian was violent against her throughout their entire relationship and that he had a bizarre tendency of citing scripture when he was angry. Annie also said that she once saw Ian throw a sippy cup so hard that it broke a window during a family gathering. In her words, he just wasn't right and wasn't normal. She also believes that Ian purposely moved Katie to the middle of nowhere and kept her as isolated as possible from her family and friends. Sadly, just when it seemed like Katie had escaped and started a new life, it was taken from her. If convicted, Ian could face life in prison or the death penalty. Number 8. Danny Reardon. Early one morning in 2014, police were called to a residence in Edgewood, Florida. They were greeted by a screaming woman who was later identified as 24-year-old professional bodybuilder Danny Reardon. She was accused of hitting her boyfriend Ian Schofield and damaging his truck in retaliation for him noticing that she was tipsy and trying to take her home. Witnesses claimed that she also ripped plants out of the ground and hit several vehicles. Ian said that he didn't want to press charges against Danny for the alleged attack or damage to his truck, but the police decided to charge her with domestic battery and resisting arrest. Officers said that Danny reeked of booze and that they saw her beating the dashboard of a vehicle when they took her into custody. They also claimed that she slammed her head into the back of a seat after being put in the patrol vehicle. The young woman was booked and released with a scheduled court date. While the outcome of the case is unclear, it appears as though she's moved on from the incident and is still active in the bodybuilding world. Number 7. Killer Sally McNeel. Military service and professional bodybuilding brought former Marines Sally and Ray McNeel together during the late 1980s. They married just months after meeting, and within days Ray became physically and mentally abusive towards Sally and her 2 kids from a previous relationship. Sally was the main breadwinner for the family, while Ray put all his time into pumping iron and preparing for competitions, including the prestigious Mr. Olympia tournament. In addition to paying all of the family's expenses, Sally financed her husband's costly steroid use. She later claimed it was the root cause of his violent behavior. The marriage continued to deteriorate over the years. By the time Valentine's Day 1995 rolled around, Ray was having an affair. Sally was planning to leave him as soon as she gathered enough money to make a clean break, but she never got the chance to do so because she shot Ray inside their home that night and was charged with murder. Prosecutor Dan Goldstein painted Sally out as a jealous, vindictive, and violent woman who killed her husband in cold blood because she was angry about his extramarital relationship. Sally's defense attorney argued that she suffered from battered woman syndrome and that she shot Ray in self-defense when he began to choke her in a fit of anger spurred by roid rage. She was convicted of second-degree murder in 1996 and sentenced to 19 years to life. Sally was released in 2020 at the age of 60 after serving 25 years. And while she maintains she shot Ray in self-defense, she's focused on making the most of her newfound freedom, which includes a full-time job and a new marriage. She also starred in a Netflix documentary about her life called Killer Sally. Number 6. Chase Kelly. During the early morning hours of June 1, 2021, 84-year-old Mildred Whitmore was found strangled and beaten to death in her home in the English town of Nuneaton. The evidence led police to 31-year-old bodybuilder Chase Kelly, who had recently discharged himself from a nearby hospital for blood pressure issues. A nurse said that he had taken 10 times the prescribed amount of amphetamines for his post-traumatic stress disorder and appeared agitated when he left. Officers found the troubled man in a public park, half naked and in a confused state. They charged him with murder. An investigation found that Kelly had also been injecting steroids and drank a half a bottle of vodka shortly before Whitmore's murder, despite his doctor's warnings not to take his prescription medication with drugs or alcohol. His lawyer argued that he was experiencing a psychotic episode when he entered the senior citizen's home and killed her. Judge Mark Wall took no mercy on these mental health claims, stating that imprisonment was the only option and that Kelly didn't need hospitalization. He described how the defendant victimized a defenseless elderly woman who lived alone while she was asleep in bed, where she should have been safe, giving her no chance to save herself. Kelly pleaded guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility and was sentenced to a minimum of 9 years in prison. Number 5. Paul Bashi. In what attorneys later described as a roid rage attack, 35-year-old Michigan bodybuilder Paul Bashi was captured on camera brutally assaulting his girlfriend, 22-year-old Christina Perry, in 2018. In the disturbing footage, he could be seen kicking and throwing lit candles at the young woman inside his Washington Township rental home. The video also showed Bashi's arm covered in blood while he hurled a canister at Perry, who was cornered against a wall and sofa. Police charged Bashi with assault with intent to murder and with a felony drug offense after reportedly finding cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamines, and human growth hormone inside his home. Assistant Macomb County Prosecutor Jordan Fields accused Bashi of beating the victim time and time again as she lay motionless and said that he had no idea how she survived the attack. He said that Perry was kicked more than 100 times and stabbed repeatedly over a 40-minute period. Bashi's attorney, David Graham, told the court that his client was using a great quantity of steroids in preparation for a national bodybuilding competition when the attack occurred. 3 years later, in 2021, Bashi agreed to plead no contest to the assault, but he was taken into custody and his bond was revoked just days before his scheduled sentencing hearing, when he allegedly beat up his uncle with plans to skip town afterward to avoid prison time. He received a 14-year sentence despite Perry's wishes for the charges to be dropped. The couple stayed together and are now married. Number 4, Gordon Kimbro. During the early 90s, Gordon Kimbro was known throughout the bodybuilding world as a chemical machine for his heavy steroid use, insanely strict diets, and grueling exercise routines. But his hard-earned success came tumbling down in 1993 when the 31-year-old fatally strangled and stabbed his girlfriend, 27-year-old Christy Ramsey, in an apparent steroid-fueled rage. Kimbro had returned home to San Francisco from a bodybuilding competition in North Carolina the previous day when Ramsey, who was also an award-winning bodybuilder, ended their 4-year relationship. Members of the couple's inner circle told investigators that the couple exuded a healthy image, but their relationship was marked by strife and heavy steroid use behind closed doors. Police charged him with murder. Ramsey's death came amid a spate of at least 20 killings that had been committed by steroid-using men in the previous 7 years, highlighting the nation and bodybuilding industry's growing problem at the time with performance-enhancing drugs. Kimbro's family pleaded with the court for leniency. In a dramatic display, his sister, Danita Alicock, clung to a Bible and said that her brother committed his crime in a fit of passion after being unexpectedly rejected by the ideal woman of his dreams. But the judge saw this as no reason to go easy on Kimbro and imposed the maximum sentence of 27 years to life. Number 3, Dr. Bruce Nadler. As an avid bodybuilder and the self-described world's strongest plastic surgeon, Dr. Bruce Nadler was well known in both amateur and professional circles for his expertise on correcting breast development in men who use steroids. He was also favored among bodybuilders for his tolerant views of steroid use. As an open user of them himself, he said that he saw himself as a test laboratory and adamantly believed that he could come up with a proper and safe combination of drugs that avoided negative side effects. But the New York State Board of Professional Medical Conduct was less than impressed by Nadler's claims, and his lifestyle led to an investigation into his professional life. He was charged with misconduct and ultimately lost his license after it was discovered that he was prescribing anabolic steroids, growth hormones, and other performance-enhancing medications to patients without a valid medical reason for doing so. Nadler was also accused of several other offenses, including failing to perform thorough examinations and failing to keep adequate medical records for his patients. After being forced into retirement in the early 2000s, Nadler wrote a book called The Nip Tuck Workout. In 2005, he moved to Los Angeles, where he and his wife Terry opened up Nip Tuck Fitness in Beverly Hills. Not a lot is known about what happened between then and early 2008, when Bruce and Terry were found dead in their home from gunshot wounds to the head. Officials ruled the tragedy a murder-suicide and concluded that Bruce was the responsible party. The only person that could ever explain the tragedy is Bruce himself, and he took that secret to the grave. Many speculated that he was depressed over the downward spiral his life took after he lost his medical license. It's unclear whether he was using steroids at the time of his death. Number 2, Wayne Jones. After ending an on and off relationship with 48-year-old Welsh bodybuilder Wayne Jones in 2022, the ex-girlfriend caught him putting a tracking device to her car. She yelled at him and he left the scene. The woman then began to think about past run-ins with Jones and realized that he'd been tracing her whereabouts for some time. She searched her car and found that there was already a tracking device on it. Shortly thereafter, Jones showed up at her home demanding to see her and threw stones at the house when she refused. He returned a few days later and demanded the return of his tracking device and accused the woman of seeing a new man. The victim called the police, who found Jones hiding in some bushes outside the home. He told officers that he thought his ex had a man in the house, but that wasn't their concern. They warned Jones that he would be arrested if he didn't leave. He left, but he didn't leave the woman alone. Instead, he bombarded her with insulting and threatening text messages. She called the police again, and as officers were leaving her house, they spotted another tracking device on her car. Not far from the residence, they found Jones sitting in his car. This time, he was arrested. It was revealed in court they'd had a lengthy record of convictions dating back to 1990, including crimes against previous partners. In the case involving the most recent ex-girlfriend, he pleaded guilty to stalking with causing serious alarm or distress. Jones blamed his steroid use for some of his past bad behavior. The judge described him as immature and insecure, and said that he needed to learn that women aren't property, and that Jones' exes have the right to live how they want and see who they want. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison, half of which would be served behind bars before being released on parole, and he was ordered to stay off steroids. And at number 1, Chris Benoit. Tragedy struck the professional wrestling world in 2007 when WWE wrestler and former world heavyweight champion Chris Benoit killed his wife and son and then took his own life. Police discovered their bodies inside the family's Fayetteville, Georgia home after Benoit's employers became concerned about his absence and requested a welfare check. The murder-suicide immediately sparked suspicions that the beefed-up bodybuilder suffered from roid rage. Wrestling officials denied this couldn't have been the case because Benoit's actions occurred over a several-day span, which they claim indicated that his behavior was premeditated. But roid rage comes in many forms, according to Slate journalist Michelle Tsai, who wrote shortly after the incident that symptoms often include paranoia, mania, mood swings, impatience, and uncontrollable aggression. Steroids can also cause depression and suicidal thoughts. Tsai also pointed out that roid rage can occur in short outbursts or cyclical bouts, or a lengthy psychotic episode, making it seem all the more possible that Benoit was under the influence of performance-enhancing drugs. An investigation found that Benoit and other wrestlers had illegally obtained steroids that were not in compliance with WWE standards in the year leading up to his death. There was also speculation that years of having his head banged around in the ring may have caused behavior-altering brain damage. Tests revealed that he had an advanced form of dementia and that his brain resembled that of a typical 85-year-old with injuries that are also known to cause depression and suicidal tendencies. After the findings regarding Benoit's brain condition and drug use came to light, WWE removed any mention of the disgraced athlete from its website.
Would you rather spend a year playing a sport you hate or receive an injury that prevents you from working out for the same amount of time? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.